In an urban landscape, stormwater infrastructure is designed to convey the water off of the impermeable surfaces as soon as possible to avoid flooding. So when traditional stormwater infrastructure works, it works really well to just get all that water out. But something that we see happening a lot is the first flush event. So that's when on the ground there's salt, sand, we have dog poop, maybe some fertilizer on the grass. And so when it rains, it just flushes all of that water through the intake, down the pipe into a waterway, where it's affecting animal habitat and a lot of ecosystems. When the water is moving so quickly and it finally gets to that waterway, it's increasing the flow rates down in the streams. And so then it's eroding a lot of the stream banks and making things move a lot more quickly and moving silt and sand down those stream banks a lot faster and eroding and compromising our streams and rivers.
In Coralville, in areas that have a lot of utilities or we don't have a lot of space to install larger bioretention cells, we install these planter boxes. The media is the same, the rock chamber is the same, the cross section is the same, but we go vertical on the sides instead of laying them back as we do in typical bioretention cells. These practices are great in areas where you just don't have a lot of space. We have private utilities, we have public utilities, we have the lights, and it was easy for us to run these utilities through the media mix within the bioretention cells. Also, if the utilities were under concrete, you have to cut the concrete and go through and get them, but in a bioretention cell, it's pretty easy. Sand and amended soil, move some plants, fix your issue, and then put those plants back on. A good way to increase the ability of them to treat more water is to connect them with underground rock chambers. So when you look down the roadway and you see these planter boxes, in between each planter box is a long linear rock chamber that goes from the edge of the street to the sidewalk. And within that area is 3 foot of clean rock. This clean rock connects with the planter boxes. They have holes in the concrete that allow water to flow between the rock chamber within the right-of-way and the planter boxes. So in these bioretention cells that we have here, we needed to create a planting plan. So what sort of plants do you put in a bioretention cell or a stormwater planting box? Well, almost anything. The number one thing, the most important thing for designing what plants go in these practices is what is acceptable to the owner and what are they able to maintain. So in this case, the city owns the stormwater planter boxes. And so we put in plants that the city is able to maintain and that they find desirable. So City of Coralville loves daylilies. We have daylilies everywhere. They also really love tulips in the spring to give some color. So in these boxes we have tulips that come in the spring. We weren't quite sure how well that would work within a stormwater practice, but it has worked great. So we have the tulips come up in the spring, they provide some color, they look great. And then we have daylilies that come up. We've also installed blue flag iris, which is a very typical plant that people use within their backyards. And then black-eyed Susan is always a popular plant that will give you color through the summer. So that's another plant that we know how to maintain and we know the public likes. So those are the plants that we've installed here.
And I think of stormwater BMPs as nature's best management practice system, as nature's wastewater treatment system. And it does this by slowing down water. So in wetlands, a lot of the times you want to increase the flow path of water so that it's slowly going through the system, or it creates an impoundment to hold on to the water. And you want to slow those things down to allow for natural processes to treat the water through microorganisms and vegetation. Green infrastructure and best management practices, in contrast to stormwater infrastructure, traditional stormwater infrastructure, is that instead of wanting to get the water the heck out of there, it wants to really slow it down, have a flow path, and impound the water. And the purpose of that is so that you're using the existing microorganisms and the vegetation there to uptake the pollutants in that first flush event and treat it naturally so that we don't see it in our ecosystems downstream, and so it doesn't run off somewhere else and it's not someone else's problem. You can see a lot of green infrastructure, stormwater practices in the landscape that are next to parking lots, next to sidewalks, next to roads. A lot of these really impermeable surfaces where we need to have a place to put the water and treat it. On the larger scale, you see them at the bottom of watersheds or where a lot of water goes in an urban area. A really good example is here in the Iowa River Landing. We have this great wetland system over here that takes a lot of the runoff that we're getting from all this development in impermeable spaces, and it's just going right there to treat all of that water.
We're at the Iowa River Landing Wetland Park in Coralville, Iowa, and I'm going to talk with you a little bit about the development of this site and why the city chose to utilize wetlands in this location. The city of Coralville purchased the land in this corridor. It was a brownfield site, so we had 40 acres of brownfield here that needed to be reclamated. The city was able to obtain brownfield grants from the EPA and come in here and clean up some sites. So there was a lot of diesel in the ground, a lot of contaminated soils. So this area was mitigated first, and then it was redesigned for development. During that design process, wetlands were located, and this area is a historic wetland that you can see from the 1920s aerial. So the city had a few options there. Either they fill in the wetland and build on top of it and provide mitigation somewhere else of a wetland, or they design around the wetland and try to restore it. So the city chose the latter, redesigned around the existing wetland, and hired consultants to help us make it an amenity for the city and also for the hotel. So here you'll see the hotel, and behind us you'll see the wetland with the boardwalk around it. It's been a great amenity to the hotel. Guests come here, walk. We have a tower that you can go up and see the Iowa River on the other side. And it's also provided a lot of habitat for species that live within the Iowa River corridor. It's acted kind of as a nursery area for spawning fish, amphibians, turtles, and it's provided a lot of benefits to us as a city.
If you live in a municipality and you're fortunate enough to have a cost share program, there may be funding available to help offset some of the costs associated with constructing some of these best management practices. So some great technical resources would be the Iowa Stormwater Education Partnership, ISWEP. They have a great website. I would also recommend you talking to your local urban conservationist as a part of the Clean Water Iowa program.